thought Observer was some cyberpunk detective game, a crime thriller with jump scares, neon, and maybe a few ghosts in the machine. But that's not exactly what it is. Entirely. Observer is a breakdown. It's a slow, suffocating collapse of the mind disguised as an investigation. Yes, you are unraveling a mystery, but along the way, you unravel people and yourself. In every way, this is psychology, so I appreciate you all for recommending that I do a psychoanalysis on this game. Dan is a father with a strained and difficult relationship with his son. Lots of bad blood, regrets, the whole nine between them. So if you have daddy issues, this video may not be for you. Or maybe it is. But what makes it hit so hard isn't the setting or the technology of the world, it is how close the experience gets. Because this isn't a story about saving somebody, it's about losing them and then realizing that you were the one who pushed them away in the first place, like all bad parents do. And this is what stood out to me the most. It is an attempt at bad dad redemption. It's about how much control you have over your children until the day that you first realize you don't have any control over them. The other thing that stands out is Dan himself and the toll that his job takes on him. He is an old man with too many regrets and a body that is falling apart, clinging to whatever's left of his identity before it gets overridden by noise, guilt, and memory that doesn't belong to him. Observer is terrifying, but it's not about being chased, it's about becoming something you don't recognize. Pouring that into the toxic soup, coupled with the concepts of how parents drive their kids away from them, this is a psychological horror story. Not primarily about the dystopian cyberpunk future, but about what happens when you spend too long living in other people's heads, while your own starts to slip away. If you are a psychologist, therapist, or a cop, any type of first responder, I imagine you can relate, absorbing people's problems as this is literally your job. Also, do you yourselves as professionals have your own therapists? If you like diving deeper and going beyond, like the video because that is what we do on my channel. If you don't like this content, synchronize with that dislike button because all engagement is engagement, and welcome
to Observer, System Redux.
On paper, Dan's job is relatively simple, straightforward. He walks into a crime scene, finds the body, jacks into their mind, and pulls out whatever is left. Memories, thoughts, sensations. He doesn't need a warrant or a conversation, he just needs access. And in 2084, that is enough. But the human mind, the conscience, isn't meant to be entered like that. Thoughts aren't files, and trauma definitely isn't clean. When Dan connects to people's brains, he doesn't just see what happened, he lives it, feels it, the panic, the pain, the helplessness. This is commonly known as vicarious trauma. When you're exposed to another person's suffering so often, your brain starts to respond as if that trauma happened to you. In 1990, McCann and Perlman described it as a deep psychological shift, not just burnout. It's a complete rewiring of who you are. So, I actually knew somebody back in high school who, for some reason, everybody just went to her with their problems and they dumped every relationship or family issue onto her. But it wasn't just her friends at school, her parents would dump on her too. She was like everybody's therapist, absorbing everybody's traumas and problems, but she wasn't getting paid. I only know this because I just happened to ask her one day how she was doing and she unloaded everything onto me, and I thought to myself, how emotionally draining that must be to receive everybody's pain. But Dan isn't just witnessing or hearing about the pain, he is experiencing these people's lives and deaths, their memories from the inside, firsthand, as if he was the one living it. He feels all of it, from their traumatic childhood memory to their very last breath. Their death, the moment of impact, the sharp edges of fear right before the end. It gets to the point where his own nervous system can't tell the difference between his own trauma and the ones that he downloads. And there's actually a name for that too, emotional contagion. The tendency of people to naturally absorb and reflect the emotions around them. In Dan's case, it isn't emotional proximity where you're just near it, it's direct neural integration. Again, literally enveloping it. He absorbs their fear like a sponge. And this is also why he needs Sychrozine. Sychrozine is a neural stabilizer. Observers are required to take it regularly because the extreme strain of mind hacking causes serious damage to their mental and physiological systems. Every dive into someone else's consciousness risks destabilizing their own, causing tremors, hallucinations, seizures, and breakdowns. Me explaining it doesn't even do it justice. You kind of just have to see it for yourself what observers are experiencing. But Sychrozine only suppresses the symptoms, it doesn't fix them. An observer's dependence on it is a physical reminder that their job is killing them in slow motion. I mean, what kind of job makes you work so hard that it literally crushes your soul and kills you? Is it worth it? Well, to be honest, some people are only ever their jobs and they aren't anything else outside of that, so maybe for them it is worth it? Well, for Dan, the longer he keeps doing this, the more Sychrozine he needs to function. His brain isn't recovering anymore. It's just being held together with injections and cybernetics, but even that is killing him too, I think. Maybe even contributing to his cyberpsychosis caused by the nanophage. In the Observer universe, the nanophage was a digital plague that tore through augmented individuals like a virus, causing implants to malfunction and turn against their hosts. It also made them sick and began to warp their physical forms and mental states. But it didn't just make people sick, it shattered this illusion that technology could save anyone. However, they live in a reality where the world is so messed up, they don't have a choice, and it's just the norm now. Dan, already full of hardware and barely hanging on, lives every day knowing his own body might be the thing that breaks him next. Before he knows it, he'll be consumed by the nanophage and turned into a grotesque mechanical monstrosity. So every time Detective Dan jacks in, he's trading a piece of himself for answers that may not even matter. He isn't just collecting evidence, he's collecting trauma, and eventually there's no more room left. And people, if we can call them that anymore, are scared of Dan. But it's not just because he's a cop, it's because he is somebody who can access the one place that nobody wants touched, their mind. That fear defines the atmosphere in Observer. The horror is in the idea that your thoughts are never safe. That just because you have an idea doesn't mean it belongs to you. And that's wild. Back in the late 1700s, there was a philosopher named Jeremy Bentham who had this idea for a prison. It would be circular, with cells lining the outer walls and a singular watchtower in the center. The genius of it was that no one in the cells would ever know when they were being watched. There didn't even need to be a guard in the tower at all. Just the idea that somebody might be there was enough to keep everyone in line. And today, the truth is, there are some places that operate with this concept, that people will always behave because they think Big Brother is always watching, that Mother is watching. Observer made me think of this. French historian and philosopher Michel Foucault, a critic against his idea, later popularized Bentham's prison into a psychological model, the Panopticon. He argued that this constant sense of possible surveillance changes how people behave. You don't need to be under control. Just the possibility that somebody is watching you is enough to make you control yourself. Think about all those times that you dropped something on the floor and pretended that you didn't even notice it. But if you thought somebody else saw that, you would immediately go pick it up. That is the basic premise behind the theory in action. Why do you think God and government are so closely related and prevalent throughout history? In the game, Dan is the watchtower. Just knowing what he is capable of, knowing he could enter your mind, pick apart your memories, expose your fears, that is enough to make people hide, to not open their doors. To them, Detective Dan is terrifying because of his capability to pierce into the shadows of your mind. He represents the death of cognitive liberty, the idea that your thoughts should belong to you and nobody else. Professor Nita Farahany argues that this is a foundational human right, and she is right. If somebody can enter your mind, influence it, or extract it, what's left of you that is actually yours? People have a right to privacy. Like, just imagine how perplexing it would be if you were a growing young adult and your parents decided to take away the door to your bedroom. But for Dan, he isn't just reading minds, he's forcing them open, whether the person is willing or not, whether they're dead or not. But there is also something else that I noticed in how Dan talks about his son, Adam. Whenever Dan talks about Adam, it sounds like there's regret in his voice. Like there's too much history behind it and there's no room left to fix any of it. The entire reason Dan comes to the tenement in the first place is because he's looking for his son. But the fact of the matter is that they haven't seen each other in years. Their relationship wasn't cold because of distance, it was fractured by something deeper. You see, when Adam was born, Dan's wife, Adam's mother, was given a choice. She was dying. Augmentation could save her, but she refused, wanting to stay fullGanic. She didn't want to become something inhuman. So, Dan honored that, respecting her choice. But his son never forgave him for it, because in his eyes, his father let his mom die. He should have fought harder, begged her, intervened, convinced her to live and take the chrome. Something. What do you guys think? Her body, her choice? Or should they have insisted that she take the chrome? But here's where things get even worse in Adam's eyes. When Dan himself was dying later, he did take augmentation. He accepted the cybernetic reconstruction to survive. To Adam, that was more than just betrayal. But from Dan's perspective, he was keeping a promise that he made to his wife. He did it to protect his son. For Adam, it was just hypocrisy. Because why was his mother's life negotiable, but his father's wasn't? Consequently, this would be the first crack in a fissure that made them grow apart. Disagreements would also turn into silence, misunderstandings calcified into bitterness. Adam felt like Dan never understood him, never really listened. And I think this is a very common thing for children with their parents, because I think most parents often write their kids off and disregard their wishes or their opinions and their wants and needs, saying things like, oh, you're just a kid, you don't know what you're talking about. Not that that isn't true, because oftentimes kids do make dumb decisions, and parents oftentimes want to protect their kids from making those dumb decisions and walking a path that they already walked, but there are so many times when kids are just left unheard. And when Adam grew old enough to walk away, he did. I think this is something all of us to an extent can resonate with. We have all had some type of disagreement with our parents, and the older we get, as we become our own people, we butt heads with our parents. And I think sons, especially with their fathers. Not that daughters and mothers and the crossovers between the family dynamics don't exist, because they obviously do, but in general, from my experience and everybody that I've talked with, this is just my opinion. The reasons daughters and fathers get along so well, in a sense, where conversely the father tends to be more strict with sons is, and no, I won't bring up Freud, get out of here Freud, not in this video, is that sons are easier to neglect than daughters. I'll say that again. Fathers are often more strict with their sons because sons are easier to neglect. You know, fathers with daughters, I think naturally just have this thing where they want to give their daughters the world, but for the boys, they need to learn to become men and make the world what they want it to be. So if you are a son with a particular level of animosity or disconnection with your father, you're not alone. Father-son relationships are often so, for a lack of a better term, strained, because they are built on this invisible tension, the expectation to connect and the fear of being vulnerable. Fathers are taught to lead, to protect, to be a man and pass something down. Men have this seemingly ingrained thing about legacy. I won't get into that or talk about if it's a biological or societal thing, but sons are taught to listen, to learn, and eventually outgrow, to be better than their fathers. But neither side is really ever taught how to be emotionally open with the other. And so as a result, what you end up with are two people, two individuals standing in the same room, thinking about each other, but not saying the things that matter. A son waiting to hear the words, "I'm proud of you. You've become your own man, your own way, and the world is a better place now that you're here." Or a father waiting to hear from his son, "I still need you. I have so much to learn, and I'm going to need you to guide me in the future." But for most sons, and for most fathers, they both stay silent because they're scared it won't be returned. In stories like Observer, that silence becomes the real antagonist, and Dan is looking for his son all over the place because he's trying to undo years of distance with one desperate act of closeness, saving his son. However, the truth is, most of these stories aren't about fathers and sons being enemies. They are about two people who love each other, but couldn't find the language to say it, and to say it when it mattered, before it's too late. And sometimes, by the time that they do find the language, the moment is already gone. Usually, the father passes, or the words that needed to be said, straight up, don't matter anymore. They're not going to change anything. There is a truth that sits at the heart of all of this. Observer isn't afraid to say it. Well, I don't know if they're really trying to say it in the game, but this is a talking point regardless that got me thinking. How you treat your kids when they're adults and no longer need you is a reflection of how you treated them when they needed you. I saw that quote on an Instagram post. That's not an original idea, but it doesn't make it any less applicable. If you were a parent who was patient, safe, if you were present, your kids are going to want to keep you in their life. Your kids will still want to come around, conversate with you, ask questions, learn from you, and eventually share your grandkids with you. However, if you were the type of parent who was closed off, critical, cold, pushed them away, disregarded them, then, when they finally get the freedom to choose, they're going to choose distance. And this is going to be a reflection of you as a parent. Your son or your daughter will either want everything or nothing to do with you. And either way, it will be a statement on you as a parent. In my interpretation of the game, Dan isn't just searching for his son. He is hoping to find the last version of himself that Adam might have loved. Maybe it's a stretch. Maybe I'm overthinking, as I tend to do, but that's why you guys are here. That chase never leads to peace, because by the time that Dan finds what's left of Adam, it is too late. What he discovers isn't a reunion, it is aftermath. Decapitation. The boy he raised is dead and gone, buried under years of silence and disappointment. But what is left is a voice, Adam's voice, echoing through corrupted networks, layered with others, fractured and stretched thin. And so Dan doesn't turn away. He follows the light and he finds his son again in a tree, some sort of digital consciousness. What he finds is a self-proclaimed superior and transcended digital version of his son. He looks at this thing, this synthetic post-human consciousness, and he sees it. That flicker, that trace, that part of Adam that still remembers being a son. Or Dan thinks he does, because there is the likelihood that the real Adam is long gone and this digital copy of him is just playing on Dan's emotions, a broken father's emotions. In that moment, that father has a choice. Walk away, keep his mind, return to a body that is already breaking down, or embrace his son, embrace Adam. Let him take what's left. Most would call this a loss of identity, a total erasure. But Dan doesn't see it that way. He sees a promise. Even if Adam has changed, even if what's left is just a fragment of his son, Dan believes it is still his son. He still believes in what he told his wife before she died, the promise to protect him. So Dan says yes. He gives Adam his body, his mind, his name. Dan doesn't care about living. He knows he is done. He's lived his life. All he has left to offer to his son is his literal body, his remnants. He cares about meaning, about keeping the one last promise in a life where so many are broken. It isn't a heroic ending, by the way. It's weird, it's strange, it's bizarre, it's tragic. But it's also real. Dan disappears, and someone walks away in his place. Maybe it's Adam, maybe it's something new. But Dan believes there's still a part of his son there. A part that's worth saving. So he thinks at first. Dan doesn't make his choice because he's sure, it is because there's nothing left to be sure about. But he's also tired of everybody's emotions, broken by his failure as a father and husband, and he's out of time because his body and soul are being overridden. So what happens when the mind stays intact, but it's the body that's taken away? If you want to see what that version of horror looks like, I'll meet you in the next video. Click the video on the screen to see the psychology of Soma. It instilled existential fear and caused me to rethink my place and purpose in the universe. It took it even further by giving birth to a new fear, one where I was disturbed by the illusion of humanity.